In a previous video, we discussed understanding about the Nuraghe culture through regression hypnotherapy, as detailed in Luciano Pedersoli's book, The Megalith Builders, Psychic Archaeology and the Nuragic Civilization. Psychic archaeology refers to the use of psychic means, such as dowsing, channeling, psychometry, remote viewing, and automatic writing, to study history. The book recounts the author's experience as a regression hypnotist, uncovering information about the Nuraghe culture through a client who had lived a past life during that era. It provides insights into the peak of the Nuraghe civilization, around 1500 BCE. This is part 2. Continuing from that video, I would like to delve further into the topic of the Nuraghe culture by exploring an earlier time period, just after the Great Flood, estimated to have occurred between 10,500 BCE and 4000 BCE. This will help us understand how they eventually formed their highly spiritual civilization. In this account, we will mainly focus on the testimonies of two other individuals, Sarah and Max, who underwent regression therapy. Surprisingly, their assessments of the civilization were independently consistent. Pay particular attention to their description of the Great Flood and their knowledge of levitating stones using sound. Let's first examine the details of the Great Flood. Max, in his past life, was a survivor of this colossal catastrophe and resided along the western coast of Sardinia. This area was protected from eastward sea quakes, ruling out the possibility that the cataclysm resulted from a tsunami caused by a massive landslide on Mount Etna's slopes around 6000 BC. Similarly, the seaquake triggered by the catastrophic eruption that destroyed the Cycladic island of Thera, Santorini, in the Aegean Sea around 1600 BC can also be excluded. According to Max, before the catastrophe, Sardinia was much larger and connected to Corsica by land, as the sea level during the last ice age was significantly lower, approximately 120 meters lower, than it is today. The ethnic group he belonged to originated from northern lands. The climate was extremely cold, with internal lakes freezing and summers lacking warmth. People wore heavy fur clothing and fur shoes for protection. Despite the harsh climate, the region was mainly covered in forests, and there were abundant lagoons teeming with fish. The inhabitants were hunter-gatherers armed with spears tipped with obsidian. Most of them lived in rock shelters and were led by a chief. Burials were conducted with the deceased preserved intact. Shortly before the cataclysm, there was a pervasive smell of rotten eggs and burning, accompanied by intermittent flashes from the south, particularly visible at night. This was followed by a discharge of water from the land and a torrent of grayish-black seawater, resembling a hurricane. Subsequently, an exceptionally long, tall, and unbroken wave approached from the south, from Africa, at a relatively slow pace. This mega-tsunami covered all parts of Sardinia below a certain altitude for several hours. The following days were dark and cold, with a dark gray sky. Animals and people sought refuge in the mountains, ensuring an ample food supply. The grayish sky persisted for years, obscuring the stars and resulting in a warmer climate than before. Sarah, another individual who underwent regression, provided her account of the Great Flood. According to her, the sea surged from every direction, encompassing the sky, the ground, and the coast. She also mentioned a massive fire that was followed by darkness. Although the impending catastrophe had been predicted, it was not believed. Many lives were lost as people attempted to escape to higher altitudes. According to tradition, the civilization that existed before the flood was more advanced, possessing ships, technology, and psychic abilities. After the flood, the survivors sought shelter primarily in caves. Max, in his past life, joined a group led by an elderly matriarch. Life posed immense challenges, requiring each individual to contribute to the community. Consequently, there was no place for the disabled, who voluntarily isolated themselves from society, often leading to their demise to avoid becoming a burden. The society held reverence for the sun, the moon, stones, and trees, but there was no enforced religion. Both men and women took part in sun ceremonies held exclusively during the summer solstice, while lunar ceremonies were solely attended by women, occurring during the full moon and new moon. The belief persisted that exerting willpower in the present life would facilitate reincarnation into a better future existence. Hunting was a communal activity, and the women ensured equitable distribution of food. They employed rudimentary bows with traditional arrows for small game, including birds, hares, mufflons, wild boars, and potentially the now extinct Tyrannotragus gracilis, an antelope species. Farming was minimal, apart from a crop resembling wheat. Their diet encompassed a range of game, shellfish, fish, tubers, berries, and fruits. Household items, weapons, and tools were fashioned from materials like terracotta, wood, bone, and obsidian. Girls underwent a period of isolation as part of their preparation when they reached around the age of 10. After approximately 14, following a 21-day seclusion period, they emerged with a transformed mindset suitable for establishing relationships with chosen men, coinciding with the full moon. Similarly, boys were taken away from the village to secluded locations, where they entered altered states of consciousness through the ingestion of hallucinogenic substances. This was followed by a months-long initiatory process, during which deep cuts were made on their bodies, left untreated. If they survived without infection, they gained a profound understanding of the nature of death and could then engage with women who possessed great strength. Those exhibiting exceptional endurance garnered high esteem and were permitted to procreate. Additional tests involving treated cuts demonstrated one's acquired ability to endure the pain associated with the tests. The number of cuts one bore correlated with their power, strength, and level of respect within the society. These principles applied to women as well. Men formed clans, with one of the important tasks being that of passing down knowledge from one generation to the next. Women took on the crucial role of managing the household, environment, and family. Unfortunately, they frequently faced life-threatening risks during childbirth. Similarly, the survival rate of newborns within their first 5 years was only around 20%. Ceremonies were held to commemorate the arrival of newborns and bestow blessings upon them. In this community, the deceased were left exposed within a circle of stones, allowing scavengers to consume the flesh. The bones were then cleansed, painted with ochre, and interred beneath large stones. Funeral ceremonies were presided over by the matriarch. To navigate and demarcate their territories, the community relied on the use of large stones and menhirs. Intriguing stories of using sound to levitate these massive stones come into play. 2 types of ceremonies are described. The first involves the raising of menhirs, where men chant and drum on the stones with sticks, causing them to become as light as polyurethane. This allows the matriarch and the men to effortlessly move and position the stones. The second ceremony is known as the summer solstice initiation. During this event, large fires are ignited inside stone circles, typically at night. Initiated individuals, accompanied by drumming, walk over burning coals as an initiation test. Those who pass the test and earn new cuts as proof have successfully prepared and consumed a specific potion, enabling them to levitate a few centimeters above the coals, thus avoiding burns. Another individual undergoing regression, Sarah, describes a separate community that survived the Great Flood. In this village, 2 ethnic groups coexisted. One group, believed to have originated from the north before the flood, consisted of tall individuals with fair skin. The other group, subordinate to the former, had slightly darker skin and was shorter in stature. Women in the community practiced healing using herbal remedies, while men utilized sound for their healing practices. Every village had simple Nuraghe structures and numerous menhirs, some predating the flood. The dead were placed in open stone tombs within circles of stones, intended to be consumed by scavengers. The matriarch resided in a large central hut and oversaw daily affairs. Girls lived with her until they reached the age of menstruation and were ready for marriage. Additionally, the matriarch fulfilled the role of healer. Men took on spiritual responsibilities and were guided by 12 priests selected from 12 neighboring villages. Each priest had the task of bridging the connection between the sky and the earth and specialized in a particular domain. The priest specializing in astronomy/astrology held authority over the 12 priests. The true specializations of these 12 priests likely included astronomy/astrology, oracle/predictions, geomancy, construction, inventions, transport, sound/music/healing, animals, hunting and fishing, water, fire, cult of the dead, and tradition. It is worth noting that during the peak of the later Nuragic civilization, there were slight changes in the specializations. As mentioned in the previous video, the 12 disciplines during the peak of the Nuragic civilization consisted of an astronomer/astrologer, oracle, architect, geomancer, doctor, herbalist, musician, mathematician, weapons master, guardian of tradition, guardian of waters, and guardian of fire. Comparing the 2 accounts, you can see that the earlier specializations of inventions, transport, and cult of the dead were replaced by the doctor, herbalist, and mathematician. The weapons master assumed the role of the animals specialization, pertaining to hunting and fishing. Similar to Max's account, this village also had a ceremony involving the levitation of stones using sound. During this ceremony, with the matriarch as the officiant, the sages, men of the highest rank, struck short sticks made of sacred wood together, simultaneously gesturing and vocalizing. Subordinates played drums. These rituals were conducted to reduce the weight of the enormous stones, enabling the dark-skinned men to lift and position them according to their master's instructions. From both accounts, we can draw some rough comparisons between these pre-Nuragic and post-flood civilizations with the later, more advanced Nuragic civilization. The earlier civilizations appear to have had a slightly more matriarchal structure. As the pre-Nuragic period transitioned into the Nuragic period, rituals gradually shifted from focusing on the moon and water to emphasizing the sun. The importance of physical strength increased, leading to the construction of more Nuraghe towers, which initially were simple and few in number but became increasingly complex in design. It is also intriguing to note that somewhere between these earlier civilizations and the later ones, the knowledge of how to levitate stones using sound was lost.